Hello, my name is Stasia. I'm content manager at SEO Ranking, and I'm happy you're with us on our fourth day of our marketing marathon, addressing the questions of how to keep your business afloat during and after the crisis. Our guest today is an SEO expert and strategist, Adam Chronister. Adam, say something so we know that.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Happy to have everyone aboard, and yeah, just looking forward to discussing some of the current situation with everybody. So
let me tell you a couple of words about Adam. Adam is an SEO strategist at Leaf, and he has over 10 years of experience in digital marketing under his belt, and he will share the advice today on how to measure the impact of COVID-19 on our websites and how we should and whether we should adapt our marketing strategy to the new reality. Before handing you over to Adam, I want to remind you that you can ask questions and Adam will answer them in the end of the session and during the session, depends on the questions. And also for the most interesting and thoughtful and on-point question, you will get 1 month optimum subscription to SEO Ranking platform. Adam will choose the best question after the session. Adam, please start your presentation with a couple of words about yourself.
Absolutely. Let's get that fired up here now. As Stasia said, I've been in the digital marketing space for close to a decade now, and a little bit about my background. So I started out in the world of software development, and quickly out of college realized that I had a kind of a greater pull towards marketing. And so shortly out of college, I kind of pivoted from pure software development into digital marketing, got my toes wet in social media marketing, and then really fell in love with search engine optimization, and have been doing digital marketing ever since in various realms. So we do a lot of web design, of course, a lot of SEO, a lot of pay-per-click marketing. But in general, we work with a lot of businesses really just trying to find and develop strategies to help them grow in this busy online space that we're all involved with. And so with recent events, we really wanted to kind of help our customer base as well as other people better understand how to navigate the territory that we're in. So I called this talk Measuring the Impact of COVID-19 on Your Website, Adapting to Today and Preparing for Tomorrow. And really, a lot of us have been essentially side-blinded by COVID-19. If those of you out there that run businesses, have been aware of what's going on, as most of us are, we know that there's a lot of huge shifts that are happening, and to some extent we don't know how long, but what we can pretty much take away is that whether this is a short-term global shutdown or more likely a long drawn-out recessionary type situation, we know that in recession type environments, there's a lot of shift that does and needs to happen. And so it's with this that we wanted to kind of address some of these topics, discuss some of the generic and more basic things we should be doing and thinking about, and then kind of doing a deep dive into ways that you can look at and assess your current marketing avenues to figure out, one, if you're having an impact or if coronavirus is having an impact on your business, and two, which kind of avenues you should take to kind of adapt to the current situation. So that's hopefully what we're going to get out of today's talk. So the big question that we keep hearing is, how is COVID-19 impacting my web traffic? Or how is it impacting web traffic in general? One thing that we're seeing with a lot of our clients is about an average 20% drop in general traffic. And some clients are less, others are more, but that seems to be the average. But the real question is, how is it impacting traffic, across different business verticals? And the answer, like most things in the SEO world, is it depends. So we looked at a couple different verticals to kind of figure out the environment. We noticed that e-commerce sites, especially those in the essential space, are actually seeing a surge in traffic. So these are one of the outliers. That's not the case with every e-commerce platform out there, obviously. But if you're in a space that's considered essential right now that feeds into that current environment that we're in, you may actually be seeing a pickup of not only traffic, but possibly sales. Health and wellness sites are also those that are surging. So as people are paying attention to what's going on, there's more interest and curiosity in the health and wellness space. So those businesses are certainly seeing a pickup in traffic and interest. Then there's news and financial sites. Obviously, many of us are kind of tied to the news right now, also curious about our financial situations, whether it's our individual or business stock portfolios. We're seeing a lot of volatility there. So of course, there's heightened interest, in a lot of sites that are in those verticals are seeing a surge. With the inability in certain areas to go to a dining restaurant to sit in, there's been more interest in things like recipes or gaming sites. And so there are verticals out there. You may or may not be in one of these where we're seeing pickup. And then the most surprising is travel. The travel is really kind of up in the air. It really depends on the space. Many travel companies, as you would expect, are getting hit quite significantly on the downside, but others are actually seeing some upticks as people are looking for opportunities for discounted travel in the future. So it's good not to take assumptions, but to actually look at the data to analyze, what is the impact, and then kind of course correct from there. So how do you market your way through a recession? There's a couple things that we're really recommending to those that come and ask us. One, how do you weather the storm? So you want to learn to be flexible. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways we can all learn from this is, how do we become flexible and fluid in our business? You want to kind of halt and pause before you immediately cut your marketing budget. Typically, your marketing spend or marketing spend in general is one of the first things that businesses cut. But that could actually be a mistake. It may be the right scenario for some businesses, but for others, it could be really detrimental. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a bit. Make sure that you're focusing on your existing customer base. This is really important because it's easy when you're worried about the future to think about, bumping up your sales, trying to go out and generate new leads, but don't forget about your existing customer base. They're kind of your first line of defense. Also get to know your target audience's ability to deal and handle with recessionary behaviors. If you know how they're going to react, you're going to be better equipped to support them in their own businesses. And then the last takeaway is start tracking and analyzing anything and everything you can. Many of us have maybe more time on our plate as we're working from home or working remote. We have less of the general office distractions. And so now is a really good time to start tearing apart and analyzing your marketing strategies, get a better sense of what's going on, not only in the short term, but in general. So this is a good opportunity to pause and take inventory of what you're doing. So first, focus on your existing customers. We kind of touched on this. Start with your most valuable and loyal customers. Those are the first touch points that you want to make in your business, making sure that you're communicating with them and making sure that everything's okay in their business front. Don't be afraid to do more than you're required. Many businesses are struggling themselves, and we're all kind of in this together. So you may need to be a little bit fluid in your business offerings. The business environment that we had 2-3 months ago is really not the same. So be prepared to be flexible. And I think you'll see it come back around as businesses also do that in turn. In some cases, businesses might need to offer discounts, pushback services, or do other types of supportive things to keep your existing channel healthy. And then reach out. So this is really important. Many of us in the marketing space, we're used to the typical types of communication, but we may need to get a little bit more personal in the short term and really do a better job of reaching out on a one-to-one basis. And we'll go into that as well here shortly. So there's this quote that is often often prescribed as being written by Darwin. Now, we don't know the actual source. I think it's been debunked. Nevertheless, it sounds like something he would say, and it's actually really good advice for an environment like this. It says, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is most adaptable to change. And this is never more true than in a recessionary type environment, and never more true with businesses. We see some of the most wealthy businesses actually come out of recessions. And so those that can adapt, innovate, those are typically the businesses that in 5-6 years are dominant. So some house cleaning that we want to kind of look at, or housekeeping. One is to make sure that you're updating your general business information. So many of us have different business verticals, properties that we work with. There's Google My Business, for instance. If you are in a situation where you've had to reduce your hours, make sure that you're specifying that on that platform. Of course, there's Facebook as well. Make sure you're updating your information there and communicating any changes to your business in those verticals. But the biggest thing that I see missing is companies' websites. A lot of companies are not doing what I would consider an adequate job in updating the communication on their websites. Many are doing a good job in the social front, maybe in these third-party channels, but a lot of website platforms allow for easy integration of modules, say a news or info ticker that allows you to address changes on the fly, or just the general practice of going in and updating your landing page copy to address any changes in the business. That's one thing where I'm seeing a lot of lack, where it's really important, because that's your website is often one of the very first touch points that customers are going to have. And so communicating adequately any changes is going to be a big benefit for you. And then I want to talk about some things that I'm seeing in the space, the business space as well, some ideas we can maybe take away. One, a lot of businesses, especially in the restaurant and other spaces, are having to go online and go online quick. So we see one example here in the middle. This is a company, a restaurant called Aladdin's. And of course, they've quickly adapted their services, did a partnership with DoorDash and are doing delivery. A lot of other businesses in the restaurant space are also, of course, pivoting to drive-by services where you can stop and pick up the food, or delivery. So again, being adaptable and versatile is going to benefit you. There's another business, this example here on the left, the Hot Box Yoga. They're doing many of their classes online now. So they're starting to take their classes, put them into a virtual sphere, keeping a lot of their customer base. And also it's actually really helpful because they're getting more clients that maybe are pent up at home, still want an exercise regimen. So this is a great example of one way you can adapt your business, especially here in the short term, but could actually eventually lead to a larger opportunity as you're no longer confined to 4 walls in a physical location. And then there's the idea of the scenario on the right, virtual counseling. This example is not one of our clients, but we do have a client that actually is pivoting all of their services in the counseling space to online. The government's starting to roll out benefits to businesses that are doing telehealth, and counseling services are typically rolled in that. Another thing that's not shown here that we thought was a great idea is businesses in the restaurant space joining together and coming out with a joint campaign. So we saw one campaign where they were doing a local restaurant challenge. I think it was about 10 restaurants in a local geography teaming up, putting out a mutual marketing piece, sharing that on all their social media channels, and challenging people to try a new restaurant each month. So it's these kind of activities, being agile, creative. It's going to be this kind of thing that's going to get you through a lot of the scenarios that we're going through at the moment. So increasing your customer communication. Again, I can't stress this enough. There's a lot of ways that businesses are doing this. Obviously, addressing changes to their social media platforms, In the middle here, we have a company that's just addressing how they're taking care and taking serious the cleanliness of their business, their restaurant. Many of us by now, like for example, this email on the right, most of us have seen probably a bombardment of COVID-19 emails. These can be helpful, but if you're still getting them at this point, most of them, I'm guessing you're probably ignoring. I know we're getting like hundreds of them. And so it's a lot, but if you can make it more personal, it's going to be beneficial. And then getting down to the basics. So pick up the phone and call your customers. This is really, I think, the most personal thing you can do right now, especially given the social distancing type environment we're in. You can send a blast email and you can communicate via social media, but picking up the phone right now, just one-on-one discussing ways that you can help, sharing some concern, reaching out, I think that's going to be more impactful right now than it probably ever has been before. And it's really an inefficient channel for reaching out to your customer base because you're essentially just paying for your phone bill. There's no excess charges for making those calls. You want to be mindful of the message. Make sure that you're not tone deaf. So there's been a lot of companies lately that have been under a lot of flack for being either tone deaf or not adaptive in their policies or their communication. Right now is really not the time to pitch or do hard sells. Now's the time to reach out and ask how you can be of help. People are struggling, and the last thing they want to deal with right now is a hard sell. So be mindful when you're reaching out and doing your marketing. You're really going to probably have to pivot your message in the short term to adapt to the scenario. Also, make sure you're personal and empathetic. Using empathy, being empathetic in this scenario is going to be a big benefit. Make sure that you're expressing your concern, whether your communication is direct or indirect. And then again, ask if you can help. That's the best thing you can do. All of us have something to offer. So make sure you go in for that ask, but make sure it's with the right tone. Another great quote I like from Warren Buffett says, "Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful." Now, of course, Warren Buffett is speaking specifically to a financial environment, but this also has a very, very relevant impact to your business. One of the best things you can invest in is your business. And so many people are pulling back and are really afraid, but those companies that can rise through the turmoil and actually kind of pick up and do even more than they did before, they're going to be better off for it. So during a recession, marketing is kind of the first area that companies pull back. But one of the things that we forget about is if you're pulling back or thinking of pulling back, so is your competitor base. So slashing your marketing budget may help you in the short term, but it could actually end up costing you in the long term. So this is something you want to think about and think carefully before you completely slash all of your marketing budget. Now, a maintained marketing budget, or even one that is actually picked up during these times of uncertainty, means that you're actually able to penetrate and create more market share. So if most of the people in your space are retracting and you're pushing forward, or at least maintaining your current marketing environment, you're going to see even more traction. You're going to start breaking through, getting more market share. And sometimes this is the best opportunity to rise above the competition if you have the resources to do that. And I would say, don't cut your marketing, but optimize it. This doesn't necessarily mean that you're not pulling back spend. In some scenarios, you may need to pull back spend, but don't stop marketing whatever you do. This is probably one of the best opportunities to ramp up marketing, however that's done. So I wanted to talk about kind of two scenarios here. You have time and money. These are two types of value that we can look at. And so you have to ask yourself, do you have more time but less money? Or do you have more time but less money? And based on that scenario, there's different verticals and options that you can look at as to how you spend or your marketing resources. So if you're in a scenario where you still have a healthy budget, maybe you've put some money aside, or you still have business coming through the doors because you're in one of those benefiting businesses, then maybe now is the time to, maintain or increase your email marketing. And maybe this is, an email marketing platform like MailChimp or iContact or others. You might want to start investing more into that vertical. Again, just making sure that you're still not tone deaf in your messaging. Maybe now is the time to invest in paid social or ramp that up more. Or maybe you want to add some pay-per-click marketing into the scenario. Perhaps you need some help with your SEO scenario and you need to hire somebody on board to help create a better scenario in that environment. And then of course you can always supplement content to keep your content churning. And that's again a scenario where you have more money than time. But perhaps you're like a lot of business right now, worried about income. Maybe some of your customer base has dropped and you say, hey, I don't have more money to spend in marketing, but maybe you have more time because of the current scenario. Everybody's working from home, there's less distractions, so you have more time, less money. In this case, there's still a lot of things you could and should be doing. So direct email outreach. One of the things that we're doing is we're sending less mass emails and doing a lot of one-on-one, literally direct, personalized emails. It's fairly time consuming, but even outside of environments like this, those very personal emails often have a better open rate and more of a response rate than the mass emails that we all get day in and day out. So of any time to do that direct email outreach, very one-on-one, very personal, now is one of the best times. Of course, organic social. Many companies hire third parties to manage their social media environment. However, perhaps now is the time to get more involved with that, putting more on yourself as a business owner. Then we already mentioned this, but picking up the phone. So it's really important that you pick up the phone, reach out to that customer base, make sure you're telling them that you're there and ready to help. So DIY SEO. I'll be the first to say that search engine optimization is a challenging field. We've been doing it for almost 10 years and it changes day by day. But the scenario right now is there's so many free courses out there, especially given the COVID-19. I've seen some of the biggest companies in the space offering free courses that they charged hundreds if not thousands of dollars for in the past. So if you have time to learn, now is the opportunity, not only because maybe you have more time, but two, because there's courses that are out there that are free that normally would cost you hundreds if not thousands of dollars. And then of course, DIY content, similar to the organic scenario, the organic social scenario, you can start getting more involved with writing your own content if you have the expertise and capabilities of doing that. Even if you end up doing a lot of these things that are more organic, more kind of DIY, and eventually you go back to allocating spent resources on those, as a business owner, you're going to better understand the needs so that you can later direct those vendors that you're working with. So all in all, this is a really good practice to start working more on the business and less in the business, especially in this environment. So we also want to start tracking essentially anything and everything. If you haven't been doing very good tracking, now is really the good time to start learning that. Everything from your web traffic, your social media traffic, paid traffic, email, phone calls, demographic data, all of this is stuff you can track for almost pennies on the dollar. And we're going to go through some of the ways that we like to track things and some of the tools that we use. So Google Analytics, most businesses by now are using Google Analytics. At least they have it installed. However, a lot of businesses, you log into a Google Business or a Google Analytics portal can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of data there. And so knowing where to start and get going with what to track can be important. The first thing I like to stress is understanding how to track channels separately. So when you log into Google Analytics, you're going to have on the left-hand side an audience tab, and you're going to see all traffic and channels. And this is going to give you a nice holistic view of all of the different marketing channels that are driving traffic into your business. It's important to look at each channel independently, Otherwise, you're going to miss some interpretation of that data. And you're also going to get a better idea of which channels, whether it's an organic channel, a paid media, or social media marketing, which channels drive the most traffic, which drive the most revenue if you have e-commerce integration, as well as those that have the best dwell time, the best time on site. And so it's important to know what each channel is doing independently, which ones are working the best, which ones need the most help. So make sure whenever you're getting into your Google Analytics that you're segmenting by traffic. Again, that can be done in the all traffic channels element there. Tracking sessions. So again, whenever you're tracking sessions, looking at the organic traffic that's coming into your site, you want to make sure that you're segmenting by organic traffic if you're looking for what your site is doing on the search engine optimization front. In this pane here, we're looking at an example where we've segmented organic traffic. We've looked at our sessions, essentially our traffic that's coming in via search engines, and then we've looked at a month view. And in a lot of reportings, ourselves included, we'll look at month over month. But sometimes month over month data can be a little bit deceptive. Not only do you have some months that have less days, but sometimes you want to also look at the big picture, especially if you have data that goes back a year or two. So go ahead and look at your month over month data, but also making sure that you're looking at a larger trend. This is an example of kind of what I'm talking about here. A spike or a dip in 1 month is not necessarily a success or failure. You want to really compare that to the previous period or the previous year. So here's an example where we see quite a delta in February. In this case, the blue line is the most recent month, so we can ascribe that to a win. But looking at, for instance, the current environment where we're trying to see, hey, have we seen a big dip or decline in traffic due to COVID-19? What you want to do is compare your year over year. If the trend is fairly similar, you can assess that even though maybe your sales have dropped off, your traffic may still be there and intact. If, however, you see a big vertical in your period over period or your year over year, that's where you can kind of say, okay, yes, we're seeing an impact on traffic, and how can we adapt instead. Then there's a view that is not often used by most novice Google Analytics users, but this is the behavior flow. So if you go into Google Analytics, on the side, you're going to see behavior and then behavior flow. This is a great visual module that really shows you how traffic is flowing into your website, where your primary landing pages are, and how customers flow through the website. So even if you're not very technical, you can take a quick look at a graph like this and have a better understanding of where customers are going once they land in your site. Much like the last view, you can also do some kind of comparisons. So you can look at, last month versus this month and see if there's any major changes here. But the biggest takeaway is to understand and look at this and say, okay, are clients or customers going to the right paths that we would like them to go to? And if not, you can start making some intelligent decisions on how to change either the pages on your websites, the menu structure, the referential links. So this is a good important pane that gets missed by a lot of those new to navigating Google Analytics. Then there's the browser plugin, Page Analytics by Google. This is one of the only free heat map type tools on the market, and arguably it's not as great as some of the paid tools, but it does essentially the same thing as some of the more expensive tools. You can install this plugin. It integrates the data from Google Analytics and pulls it into a visual view. And this can be really helpful because, again, you can see where clients or customers are attracted to elements on your site. In this case, we can see a very clear product winner, which product is getting the most attraction. there's takeaways we can take from this. One, we can just assess that this product in general is more desired. In some cases, we can get an idea that a visual element is maybe stands out more than another. So we might want to make shifts based off of this data. But this is a great free tool offered by Google that not a lot of people are using in their business, but it can be really beneficial to understand and help visualize how users are navigating through your website. Then there's also a lot of questions on tracking things like email or other third-party campaigns inside of Google Analytics. And one of the best tools that we recommend for this is the Google Campaign URL Builder. This tool makes it really super simple to generate a customized, trackable URL. Essentially, you go to the website here, you put in all of your details, so your URL, the campaign source, so if it's, say, a newsletter in this example, the medium, the campaign name, and it spits out a URL that you can then have tracked inside of Google Analytics. So here's an example of that. You could take that URL, put it in an email campaign, see exactly the type of traffic it's generating. Again, if you have e-commerce integrations in Google Analytics, you can see if it's actually generating revenue. All of the general metrics that you're going to see with Google Analytics can then be tracked outside of, say, your website. So this can be a very helpful tool if you're not already using some in-depth tracking for things like email campaigns, social campaigns, etc. Then there's demographics. A lot of people don't realize that Google Analytics does actually have demographic data. You can get a good sense of what people are visiting your website, the split between male and female, age differentiations. The way that we like to use this is comparing it really with our social demographics. I would say that generally Google Analytics demographic data is probably not the best in the world, but it's pretty accurate, and it can be a good kind of balance and check, especially when comparing against what you see in, say, your Facebook marketing. Then there's Google Search Console. The funniest thing about Google Search Console is this is typically one of the very first tools that we install on a lot of our client websites.
I'm sorry,
Most
Adam,
clients,
I have here
yeah.
a couple of questions about the previous slide. Can you go back to this?
Yeah, absolutely. This one here?
Can you explain how to really use the in-market segments, how to navigate the analytics sections that you were showing, like over the couple last slides? What we see here is like lots of information. What are we looking for, basically? So once again,
like in the flow, in this flow visualization chart, is that the one you're referring to?
What are we looking in the Google Analytics? Basically, are we defining the pages that lost the most of the traffic, or we are finding the pages that are still kind of keep it afloat?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what exactly are we analyzing with flow visualization? One, you can see where your drop-off points are. So anywhere you see a larger red, it means it's a big drop-off. I think the biggest takeaway, though, that we're looking at here is, one, how deep are people going into your website? Typically the deeper clients go into your website, the longer your dwell time, meaning the time that they're on your site, the better you're going to get that kind of quality. But also, if you notice that people are coming into, say, your primary landing page, and they're going to pages that maybe you don't want to have emphasized as much, that's a time that you might want to start moving around where those pages are in your hierarchy, in your navigation. So that's the question that I would be asking when looking at the flow visualization, for example, is, does the flow that you have right now, does it match your desired intent for where you want clients to go from the moment they land on maybe your home page, they navigate maybe into your products, and then they go into an individual product? That's kind of the questions and takeaways that you want to address. And so if you see a user behavior or flow that seems consistent with where you would like to drive people on your site, that's when you want to start making decisions on, hey, do we need to make our products page more prominent? Do we need to bury this page that's getting more traffic than we would rather have shifted elsewhere? So that's the kind of stuff we're going to look at with flow visualization. And then in the short term, also seeing if there's any big changes in this. But in the long term, it's really just understanding how users navigate your website and making sure that that is in line with your own intentions on where you'd like to drive them. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
For clarification. Now, please continue with your presentation. If we have a bit more questions, we will consider them in the end. Oh, okay.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that was a great question. And that flow chart is going to look different for everybody. So it's not a one size fits all type scenario, but definitely something that gets missed a lot and can be really helpful because it is so visual. But getting back to Google Search Console, as I was mentioning, this is one of the tools that is probably the most forgotten about, and it can be one of the most important tools. I'm still surprised to this day that Google Analytics and Google Search Console is not one main tool. It can be a little bit frustrating because if you've ever gone through the process of setting up all of these tools, you have to install Google Analytics, and then you have a separate installation process for Google Search Console. But nevertheless, it's one of the more important tools. Not only can it be a line of defense, but there's a lot of analysis that can take place through this tool. So Google communicates to your site or to you about your site through really no other channel but Google Search Console. So this is one of the only areas that you have to communicate directly to Google. You can communicate to Google about your site. So you can submit your sitemap. You could submit new pages to them. You can petition, things like manual actions that are taken against your site. It's the fastest way to get a new website indexed. It's the fastest way to get a new page indexed. So if you've rolled out a new blog post or a new page and you want to get it into the search engines quickly, this is the one pane or panel you have to do that. It also is kind of your first line of defense when it comes to any security issues that you may be having on your website. This is where you get notified of that information. And of course, there's a lot more that is available. So I wanted to showcase some of the things that we typically look at and leverage Google Search Console for. One, you have your general coverage, and this is going to give you an example of any errors that are on your page. So here in this example, we see a 505 similar to a 404. So if you happen to have broken pages on your website or some other issues, you're going to be able to see and diagnose that right within this pane, go in and address those and fix those, which is only going to benefit you from a visibility and search engine ranking perspective later on. So you get notifications and indications of that. Mobile usability. This is also a good pane or channel to address and assess any issues that you may be having with your website's responsiveness or ability to be navigated usefully in a mobile front. So they're going to showcase any issues that you may be having. Example, recently we had a client whose site had buttons that were too small and the text was too small for the likings of Google in mobile. So we were able to be identified by this, not only in Google Search Console, but once you sign up for Google Search Console, you can opt in for alerts via email. So they'll send you an email anytime there's an issue. So we went in and we increased the size of the buttons, increased the size of the text, and then we ran it through a check and passed their test. On the front side of this, there are things like speed issues. So again, any issues you're having with load time, you're going to be able to address this right here. So if you have pages that are unusually slow loading, maybe you have image issues, maybe there's some scripting language that's causing issues, you're going to be able to get notified of those, one by one, and address those right in here. So Google Search Console can be a great website auditing tool and provide a lot of data. So the other tool that's on the front side of Google Search Console is the page speed insights tool. This is not directly inside of Google Search Console, but is available just by doing a Google search for page speed insights. You can put your website into this tool, and much like the previous information here, this will give you a score both on your mobile speed as well as your desktop speed. And we know now, as of the last number of years, that website speed is a ranking factor. And so if your website is too slow, it actually can be impacting you negatively. Other things that you can track that are not always being tracked with a lot of the people we work with, one is calls. So call tracking can be quite useful and interesting. The one on the left is a tool called Call 8. It's actually one we use. It doesn't give you as much analytics data as the one here on the right, which is CallRail, another popular call tracking tool. CallRail is a little bit more expensive, but you also get a little bit more for what you pay for. There's a lot of analytics and tracking. Call 8 is, I think we pay less than like $9, $10 a month per tracked call. You still get a lot of useful information, and this can be really helpful in identifying what numbers are being generated from what channels. So we'll place this new proxy number on a client site or on one of our websites. Then we can start tracking the channels that are driving calls. And so for many in the past, or maybe even currently, your phone calls are kind of a black box. You don't know exactly what's driving them, so there's no real attribution. But call tracking was one of the best ways to bridge that gap to know, hey, what traffic channels are actually driving phone calls? So that can be really useful, especially if your business is reliant on the phone. So I wanted to talk about some optimization tactics that we can use, go into some of the things that we do and look at and research and leverage. But some of the generals are your click-through rate. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, how to analyze and improve your click-through rate, your rankings, there's your traffic, and of course there's a lot more. So one of the reports that we look at that can be especially useful for addressing how well your content is working, as well as any other content focus areas you should be looking at, is landing pages. So back in Google Analytics, if you go to behavior, site content, and landing pages, you're going to get this nice breakout of all of your website's landing pages and be able to sort them by things like sessions, revenue, bounce rate, all of that. Many people have, for instance, blogs that are in the subdirectory blog. So you can further bring down this content by doing a search. In this case, we're doing /blog, which pulls out all of the blog content. And this is a good way to figure out what is working well and what isn't. So we can see, for instance, in this example, our post on free SEO tools has seen some decent traffic. So that might be another topic or a topic similar to this that we want to keep rolling out in the future. And further, you could dig into this report and see what's not working and either disintegrate those posts or basically move away from posts that are not working. So this is a really good type of report for benchmarking and figuring out what content works, what doesn't, and what you should be doing more of. Back in Google Search Console, there's the search results pane, which can also be very helpful and insightful. You can analyze and look at things like clicks, impressions, your average click-through rate, and average position. So a lot of times when we're looking at addressing or analyzing our ranking or our search results, we might do a report for a short-term period, say like 1 month. We're going to make sure that all of these are actually selected, and it's going to provide us with a list of queries that our website is being pulled up for. So this pane allows us to see what our website is showing up for in search, which terms. We can see the impressions, we can see the position and the click-through rate. So you can get a lot of really helpful data here to figure out what terms are pulling your site up in search, which ones are getting actual click-through rates, where they're showing up in search, and then you can also take that data and analyze it further to start figuring out ways or opportunities to improve upon what you currently see. So again, in this scenario, we're going to do a short-term period, roughly a month. We're going to sort maybe by queries. I find it useful to actually export this report, which is going to give you something similar to this. And then what I'll do in the export of this report is I'm going to sort by impressions. Typically, I'm going to look for the highest impressions. And what we want to look for here when we're trying to look for opportunities to improve click-through rate is a term that has high impressions, meaning that it gets a lot of polls in the search engine, but very low click-through rate. So here is an example. We have what is need. We see that the impressions are, within the last month are almost 600, but the click-through rate is not even 1%. So what I can do, knowing that, this is one of our client sites, I can do a Google search for that term, and that's going to pull it up in Google. And I see instantly why it's not getting the best click-through rate in Google search. So the term what is need is pulling up the page. It's ranking for that term. The problem is that term's not actually in the title description. So in this case, this is actually a real scenario that we did last week. We went ahead and we switched the meta title out to say what is need. We then resubmit this in Google Search Console. So once we've updated this particular page with our better, more optimized title, we're going to submit this to Google Search Console in the URL inspect section. This then tells Google to recrawl this page, so it speeds up its re-indexation. And then we're going to wait a little bit and see what kind of results this has had. And one of the best ways to do this is with a keyword tracking tool. In this case, we're actually using SE Rankings tool. The one thing I like about the rankings in this tool is the side-by-side comparison. So literally this exercise here, we were able to move that ranking for that term up one position within 24 hours. And this can be a little bit of a tedious process, but it can be very impactful. You can do this literally one by one, going through all of this data, finding opportunities where you can increase your click-through rate. Again, you update your meta title description to better orient or be optimized based off of that information. You submit it to Google, you wait a little bit and see if it's had a results in your ranking and then your traffic. So this is one of the tips that we use, the tricks that we do for analyzing a website on page. So there's probably a lot of questions, a lot of things that we've gone through, quickly. Happy to go through and analyze and discuss some of these. At this point, open up any questions that we have from the audience.
Thank you very much, Adam, for your presentation. It was really very insightful, super useful. And yes, we have quite a bit of questions. And the range of this question is regarding the content. Should we or shouldn't we write something about COVID-19? Or should we write something, even if our business has no relevance to the issue? I mean, what should we do?
And that's a great question. I think it's really a conditional scenario. I think, unfortunately, it really depends on your business and what your business is in. In some businesses, it's going to be less relevant. In others, it's going to be more relevant. I've seen a lot of restaurants in particular, because many restaurants are still open. They've just changed their means of operation. It's like the elephant in the room. They have to address that, hey, we've changed how we're doing business. And so the one example that we gave earlier was a company that said, we just want to reassure you that we're aware of the situation. We're taking cleanliness very seriously. In addition, here's how the business has changed to shift. So as long as that messaging is going to build confidence and security in your customer base, I think it's important. Essentially, if customers have to ask what you're doing to address this, if that is an anticipated question, you should probably be addressing it before customers ask. If you're in a business that's less impacted and less relevant, again, you might want to have a sensitive tone, but you may not have to go as much into detail. Give our business as an example. We're of course addressing it from a business front, but most of what we do is virtual anyway. So I don't really need to go out of my way to address, cleanliness issues or any of the social aspects that other businesses that are more socially inclined might be dependent upon. So.
Would you recommend to put this COVID-related content on a special landing page? Of course, if it's not just a message saying that guys were with you and something like this, something encouraging and supportive. If it's, for example, a blog article about how our business is adapting or how our services are adapting to the new situation, should we put it on a special landing page, or it can be like just the part of our blog? What is the better strategy here?
Yeah, I think what I see a lot of businesses doing is they'll do essentially one piece, one content piece. They'll either have it as one central blog post that maybe they're sending specific traffic to, maybe from social media or an email campaign. Most of the communication, it seems like, that's very, serious and relevant to COVID-19 is coming via email from a lot of businesses. And that seems to be the primary way they're addressing the seriousness of it. Maybe they're driving them to an FAQ page or a blog post. And I think that's okay and relevant. I wouldn't encourage most companies to go crazy about this unless you're in a space where it's really relevant. If you're in the medical space, then yeah, you probably want to be writing about COVID-19 in most of your content. But if you're in a space that's peripheral to that, I would say it's fair to address it maybe in one blog post and an email communication. And then I would instantly go from there and switch the tone to a more positive tone to like, okay, here's what we're doing, the brass tacks, but let's get more proactive on what can we do to move forward. Like, so yes, address it, but then move on to more proactive stances, I suppose.
We have one of the questions about fun content. Is fun content appropriate now? Of course, if it's not a fun content regarding like 20 best places in New York to see right now, but like
right, yes. So I think there is a space for that, but again, you really have to kind of be careful. We have some campaigns right now where we're weighing that exact same scenario in the marketing space. And it's like, how do we address this without being tone deaf, without being ignorant or insensitive, because, this is causing a lot of trauma, not only to businesses, but there's, lives on the line. So the last thing you want to do is be insensitive. But on the flip side, if your brand is one that already has a fun sense to it, there's a lot of shared experiences we're all having, whether it's your kids at home screaming while you're doing a webinar like this one, or, the inability to go outside and you're going a little bit nuts. I think if you're already in the mode of communication that is fun and light, it's okay to have that shared empathetic type scenario. Like, yeah, we're all, a little stir crazy. Or we all understand like we're missing going out to a restaurant. So I think that's okay, but it has to be on a case by case perspective. You need to kind of know your audience, know your messaging, and if that is within the realm of what you've done in the past, I think it's okay. But again, you really want to be sensitive to the scenario, the industry you're in. Make sure that you're not overstepping there.
Thank you very much for your answer. We have also a range of questions regarding travel industry, and the main idea of several of these questions is how to keep people visiting your website, even though you can't offer actual trips right now, but what kind of content can be useful right now?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that's happening in the travel space, you know, obviously it's one of the most hard hit spaces that we're seeing right now. And so there's a lot of different ways that people are addressing this. I think one of the biggest ones is a lot of businesses are having to reevaluate their, you know, their terms and services, like, you know, everything from airlines to hotels to vacation companies are having to kind of realize, like, wow, like we're having to make modifications to our cancellation policies, sometimes stepping them up and other times bringing them back. Sometimes, you know, being flexible with those policies because, you know, so many people have the inability to travel. What a lot of businesses seem to be doing, and this goes from airlines to hotels, is some businesses are trying to be more flexible, not necessarily with refunds. If you've booked a vacation or an airline trip recently and you've tried to get a refund, there's a very good chance you probably haven't got a direct cash refund. And the reality is, if all of the refunds that came in for a lot of these businesses were refunded, most of those businesses would be out of business. So it's frustrating. There's a lot of brands in the market or in the travel space that are going through heavy reputation management issues. But in some cases, it's like either we suffer from a reputation issue or we go out of business. And so as a result of that, what a lot of businesses are doing are saying, hey, we're going to honor the investment you made in our business, whether it's an airline ticket or a vacation, but we're going to give you flexibility on when you can repurpose this, you know. So you know, a personal instance, I was supposed to go out to Texas in a couple weeks from now, had to cancel that, obviously. The airlines didn't give us a cash refund, but they gave us credit. They reimbursed the money as credit. So we have, you know, 12 months to use that, which is fine because, you know, I'm anticipating travel in 12 months. The other thing in the travel space too is, and this is much like the restaurant space too, I truly believe there is a pent up demand. So as soon as things start to calm down, I think people are dying to, you know, get on a plane, maybe cautiously, but get on a plane, go to a restaurant, get out of the house. So the longer you can allow or extend that goodwill towards your customer base, I think the better you're going to be in the long term.
Thank you very much. The next set of the question will be regarding using tools, using Google Analytics in particular.
Sure.
Can Google Analytics be used to analyze all media platforms segmented by channel? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, websites?
Absolutely, yeah. So right out of the bat, you can measure social channels within Google Analytics. I think essentially they segment by social channels. So yeah, you can absolutely look at social channels. And actually, so we work with a lot of social media marketing people. We don't do a lot of social media marketing ourselves, but we have a lot of partners. And the most interesting thing is there's a lot of social media marketing platforms out there. If you do social media marketing, chances are you're using one of these platforms. And they have a lot of interesting data. Obviously, you have the native platform. So Facebook has their, you know, their back end, Instagram. But this is a really good opportunity to actually contrast and compare that with the data that's coming into Google Analytics. And I think if you do that, you'll be really surprised. Sometimes there's some pretty stark verticals, which has even stirred conversations that, you know, there's some theories that Facebook is exaggerating their numbers, because when you do the compare and contrast between the traffic that's associated or attributed to, say, a Facebook channel inside of Google Analytics, sometimes it can be pretty stark. So I always recommend people comparing those two channels, but absolutely there is the ability natively within Google Analytics to look at your social channels and also segment those even further than what kind of comes out of the box.
Thank you. Very explanatory. The next question is about SEO in general. Is this
Mhm.
the time to invest in SEO? We know that it gives its results in some time, not immediately.
Right.
So
Yeah.
maybe what we can focus on now that will give us results when all of it is over, or at least in some decline.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and that's the thing I always have to address to people is SEO is a long-term play. So unlike pay-per-click marketing, where you can kind of turn it on and start getting traffic right away, if you start an SEO campaign, typically you can expect 3 to 6 months before you're going to start seeing, really that hockey stick type effect. Um, Ultimately, I think everyone should be investing in SEO. But it is good to have that mindset that what you do now may not have an impact for 3 to 6 months. So really, whenever you're considering using or diving into SEO, you really need to be projecting yourself forward 6 months ahead of time and say, okay, where do I want my traffic to be in 6 months? Um, the one thing about organic traffic is it's still one of the most lucrative forms of traffic, even more quality uh, in some respects than pay-per-click marketing. I think ultimately businesses that have the budget and resources should be doing a little bit of everything. But we're big fans of SEO. It's what we've done, throughout the years. It's always kind of our front runner. And so I would say now is a good time. I would say, yesterday or the day before, or, months later
six
was the
months
best time to
ago.
invest in SEO. But again, if you're in a scenario where your time is maybe freed up because of the current environment, this is a really good time to start learning. And as I mentioned earlier, there are so many amazing courses and resources that people are offering for free as a help because of COVID-19. This series is just an example. This is a series that is a response to what's happening, and so here you're getting free education. But there's so many courses right now. Companies like Moz, I think SEM Rush has a lot of stuff. SE Rankings doing a lot of stuff. So there's so many free materials right now that if you wanted to learn SEO, now's a really great opportunity, because give it a month or two, and those resources that are usually hundreds if not thousands of dollars are probably going to decrease a little bit. So that would be my answer.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, if we understand that SEO will shoot like for us in 3 to 6 months if we are putting efforts in it right
Mhm.
now, what would you recommend to focus on what channel of traffic to get results faster? Like if
Mhm.
it's a matter of kind of an emergency.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the best instant traffic sources, I think, fortunately or unfortunately, are going to be paid channels. Well, a lot of times what we like to do when there's resources available is we'll start out instantly with like a pay-per-click marketing campaign. We'll get that rolling. And while that's rolling and being optimized, we'll start working on an organic channel so that a client can get leads coming in right away. And so paid channels, whether it's pay-per-click marketing, in search or social, can always be a very quick way to get leads. My opinion of those two channels and which ones make the most sense if you're looking at paid social versus pay-per-click marketing in search is going to be kind of based on your business model. If you're a necessity, like let's say you're a plumber or you fix appliances, typically people need that stuff right away, and they're going to go to Google and say, I need a plumber in Seattle, Washington. So that's an avenue or a territory where I would recommend getting in front of search users, so people doing search engine searches. If your product is more of a impulse buy, maybe you sell a sneaker brand or water bottles or something that's more of an impulse buy, then maybe you want to leverage more on the paid social front, because they might not need your product, but they might want it once they're introduced to it. So that's kind of how I look at those two channels. But definitely paid media is the quickest to get up and going. But it's not always, from a long-term perspective, it's not always the best bang for your buck. But again, these days, you almost have to be doing a little bit of everything. It's really hard to succeed if you're only doing social media marketing, or you're only doing SEO, or you're only doing paid. So again, if you can offset some of that with your own internal knowledge, that's great. If you have the budget to have a mixed digital marketing campaign, that's going to be, even better.
Thank you very much, Adam. And we have here a last question. Should we create content, or now stop producing content and focus on promoting the existing one?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would suggest people never stop creating content. But on the flip side of that, there is a really good point in justification to addressing older content. So I think some businesses, and I've seen this a lot, just think, oh, I always have to be creating new content, and they never go back and update old content. But I would argue that by going back and updating old content, you're actually creating new content, or at least refreshing it. So one of the things that is kind of rolled into Google's algorithm is this idea of freshness. So a number of years they had what was termed the freshness update. Essentially what that does is it looks at how fresh a website and its content is, and it gives it a benefit because of that. So if you have content out there that can be updated, can be made more relevant, then I would say by all means you should do that. But don't think of that as necessarily old content. Think of that as updating, or refreshing content, which can be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than new content. But you should always be creating content, whether it's blog post or social media, marketing post, videos, webinars. Really, content is at the heart of digital, or any marketing for that matter. So never stop that.
Thank you very much, Adam. We've answered all of our questions. And I want to thank you very much for being with us today, for giving such an informative and, very comforting presentation and speech. Thank you very much for this. And
my pleasure,
to our participants, I want to remind that we have one more day of our marketing marathon, and tomorrow we're expecting our speaker, Craig Campbell, who will focus on the question how to make your people stay, make your clients stay, instead of trying to get new ones. And it's also the anti-recession, anti-the crisis presentation. So
you're not going to want to miss that one. So I know Craig, and that's definitely one to check out for sure. All right, thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.